Welcome to the Baboom Baboom podcast, your go-to source for expert tips on car stereo installation, vehicle wiring, and all things wiring related. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we've got the advice to help you power up your ride. Get ready to crank up the volume on your knowledge and make your next wiring project a success.
Okay, you know that feeling. When you're all set for a trip with your trailer, vacation, hauling gear, whatever, and boom, nothing works.
Yeah,
Lights are out, maybe even the brakes, and it's like, where do I even start?
definitely a huge headache.
Exactly. A blown trailer wiring fuse can really ruin your day, and I think we've all been there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But what if we could figure out why those fuses keep blowing in the first place? Like, what if we could actually prevent it?
So that would be great.
That's what we're diving into today. We found this awesome guide called Troubleshooting and Fixing Trailer Wiring Fuse Failures, and it is packed with helpful advice.
Sounds promising.
It really is. It's like instead of just replacing the fuse and hoping for the best, this guide actually encourages you to become like a trailer wiring detective.
A detective. Interesting.
Yay. So let's put on our detective hats and try to figure this out. The guide talks about the 6 most common reasons those fuses blow. And the first one is a short circuit.
I've heard of those, but I'm not really sure what they are.
Me neither, really. The guide explains it like this. A short circuit is when electricity suddenly goes somewhere it's not supposed to be, like a surge.
Okay, I get it.
But what does that actually look like in the real world, with trailer wiring?
Well, picture this. A wire, it's got that insulation, right? But let's say it's frayed and rubbing against the metal frame of the trailer.
Okay.
That contact creates a path of the electricity to kind of escape its normal route. It's like, bam, short circuit, blown fuse.
So the fuse is kind of like a safety mechanism preventing a bigger problem.
Exactly. Think of it like a circuit breaker in your house. It trips when there's an overload to protect the wiring.
That makes sense, but you'd think that trailer wiring systems would be designed to prevent those short circuits in the first place, right?
You'd hope so.
Huh.
And they do have safeguards, but trailers, man, they take a beating out there on the road.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Vibration, the weather, even just normal wear and tear can cause things to shift, rub, and break down over time.
So it sounds like regular inspections are super important.
Absolutely. Got to be proactive. Look for any signs of damage to the wiring insulation, any spots where the wiring might be rubbing against the trailer frame, loose connections, anything that looks fishy.
Fishy. I like that. And the guide even suggests using a multimeter to help pinpoint those sneaky short circuits. But if I'm being honest, using a multimeter is kind of intimidating to me.
I totally get that. But really, it's not as complicated as it might seem.
Okay, maybe I can handle it.
Yeah, it's basically just a tool that helps you check the flow of electricity through a circuit. You can tell if there's a break in a wire or a connection that's not working right.
So it's like a detective's magnifying glass for your electrical system.
Exactly. And we'll talk more about how to use one effectively a bit later.
Awesome. All right, moving on to culprit number 2, overloaded circuits.
This one's kind of interesting. The guide uses this traffic analogy to explain it, like a highway system.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So picture this. Your trailer wiring is like a highway, and using wires that are too thin, it's like trying to cram way too many cars onto a tiny road.
Gridlock.
Total gridlock. And that causes problems.
In the electrical world, that gridlock is what causes a surge of current that blows the fuse, right?
That's it. And
Yeah.
just like different roads are built for different amounts of traffic, different wires are designed to handle different amounts of electrical current. And that's where wire gauge comes in.
Okay, so the thicker the wire, the more current it can handle safely.
Exactly. It's all about amperage. Think of it like the amount of water flowing through a pipe.
Okay, I can picture that.
A thin pipe can only handle so much flow before it bursts. Same thing with wires. If it's too thin for the amount of current going through it, it can overheat and bam, blown fuse.
And maybe even more damage than just the fuse, right?
Unfortunately, yes. An overloaded circuit can really wreak havoc on your trailer's electrical components, lights, even the brakes.
Yikes, that's scary. Makes me realize that choosing the right wire gauge is super important.
Absolutely. It's about safety and preventing those frustrating blown fuses. And don't worry, the guide has this handy chart that shows you what size wire to use based on what your trailer needs.
That's reassuring. Speaking of vulnerable components, let's talk about those trailer lights and connectors. They always seem to be causing problems.
They do, don't they? And when you think about it, it makes sense. They're out there, exposed to the elements, rain, road grime, you name it.
But aren't trailer lights designed to handle all that? I mean, that's kind of their job, right?
Well, They are supposed to be durable. But even with modern designs, those external lights are still vulnerable to moisture, corrosion, all that fun stuff.
So what should we be checking for when we inspect our trailer lights?
Every time you hitch up, take a good look at each light. Cracks, broken lenses, signs of moisture, anything that seems off.
And what about the bulbs themselves?
Good point. Check those filaments, make sure they're intact, no signs of burning or discoloration.
And the guide also mentions the connectors as a potential trouble spot.
Oh, those connectors. They go through a lot with all that plugging and unplugging. Over time, they can get corroded or damaged.
So what's the best way to protect them?
Dielectric grease. It's like magic. It seals out moisture and prevents corrosion from getting into those connections.
But wait, wouldn't that make it hard to unplug the connectors?
It does create a seal, but it's not like glue or anything. You can still unplug them easily. Just wipe off any extra grease before you plug them back in.
Okay, that makes sense. So regular inspections, checking for damage, and using that dielectric grease on the connectors are key for preventing light and connector problems.
Exactly. And, it's not a bad idea to think about upgrading to more durable components. LED lights, for example, are much more resistant to vibration and moisture.
I heard they're really energy efficient too.
They are. It's a win-win.
All right, so we've covered short circuits, overloaded circuits, and those tricky lights and connectors. Moving on to culprit number 4, wiring gone wrong.
The joys of DIY.
I've definitely made my share of wiring mistakes over the years.
We've all been there. But with trailer wiring, those mistakes can have some pretty serious consequences. And one of the biggest things people overlook is proper grounding.
The guide talks about grounding a lot. What is it, and why is it so important?
Think of grounding as like a safety net for your electrical system. It gives extra electricity a safe path to flow into the ground so it doesn't build up in the wiring and potentially cause damage or even a fire.
So it's like a pressure relief valve, releasing that excess electrical pressure to keep things safe.
That's a great way to put it. And if that ground connection is messed up, that safety net is gone. You can end up with components drawing way too much power, leading to, you guessed it, a blown fuse.
And maybe even worse problems, right? Like, could a bad ground energize the metal frame of the trailer?
Yeah, it could. And that's a serious shock hazard. That's why it's so important to make sure that ground wire has a solid, clean connection to bare metal on the trailer frame.
No paint, no rust, no shortcuts when it comes to grounding.
Exactly. Double check those ground connections, especially if you've been doing any wiring work yourself.
Got it. All right, moving on to another often overlooked component, the connectors.
Those little guys, what about them?
Well, they might seem simple, but the guide points out that even minor damage to a connector can cause something called internal shorts.
Internal shorts. Is that like a miniature short circuit happening inside the connector itself?
That's exactly what it is. It's like having a tiny gremlin in there messing things up.
I can picture that. Those internal shorts can definitely cause all sorts of problems, including blown fuses.
So how do we keep those gremlins at bay?
Regular cleaning. Use some electrical contact cleaner to get rid of any dirt, grime, and corrosion on the connector surfaces.
And I bet that dielectric grease would help here too.
You bet. A thin layer on those connector pins creates a barrier against moisture and corrosion, helping to prevent those internal shorts.
And if you see any actual damage to a connector, best to just replace it.
Absolutely. Don't mess around with damaged connectors. It's asking for trouble.
Okay, we've talked about 5 potential culprits so far. I feel like I'm already learning so much. But we've got one more to go before we move on to troubleshooting and prevention. Water damage.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially for anyone who uses their trailer around water.
Boat owners, this is for you.
Exactly. Water and electricity, well, they don't mix. If your trailer sees a lot of water, you got to be extra careful to protect your wiring.
The guide mentions that even a little bit of water can cause corrosion inside the wires and lead to all kinds of problems.
It's like a ticking time bomb. Once that corrosion sets in, it's just a matter of time before something goes wrong.
So what can we do to prevent water damage? What does the guide recommend?
Well, for boat trailers specifically, it stresses using marine-grade wire. It's designed to handle the tough conditions of being around water.
Makes sense. What else?
Waterproof connectors are a must. They have special seals to keep water out of those connection points.
And you'd want to use those for any exposed wiring connections on the trailer too, right?
Definitely. Seal up any potential entry points for water. And the guide also suggests considering a junction box.
What's that?
It's basically a waterproof enclosure where you can house those wiring connections. an extra layer of protection, especially if you have multiple wires joining together.
So it's like a little safe haven for those vulnerable connections.
That's it, keeping everything dry and protected.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboom.com.
Okay, so we've talked about the 6 common culprits behind blown trailer wiring fuses: short circuits, overloaded circuits, faulty lights and connectors, wiring gone wrong, connector issues, and water damage. Now we know the why. So next, we'll figure out how to troubleshoot and fix those problems.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll be back after a quick break to walk you through the guide's practical troubleshooting tips so you can become a real trailer wiring detective.
Can't wait.
All right, we're back, and I'm feeling ready to tackle some troubleshooting. I don't know about you, but when I'm faced with an electrical problem, I just kind of freeze up.
I hear ya. Wires everywhere. What do you even do?
Exactly. But this guide, it breaks it down in a way that makes sense. Like, even I can follow it.
It's good. It's always less scary when you have a plan.
It really is. So where do we start? What's the first step to becoming a fuse fixing master?
Well, first things first. You got to check that you're using the right fuse. I know it sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people get this wrong.
So, like, if the fuse box says 10 amps, don't try to cram a 15-amp fuse in there.
Nope. No way. Using a bigger fuse than what's recommended is actually really dangerous.
Really? Why is that?
Because it lets too much current flow through the circuit.
Yeah.
You could damage the wiring or even start a fire.
Wow, okay, I had no idea. So we got to stick to the right fuse size.
Absolutely. It's about safety first.
All right, fuse checked. What's next?
Now, it's time to inspect those wires. Remember all that talk about short circuits?
Yeah, time to put on our detective hats.
Exactly. We're looking for any signs of damage to the insulation, places where a wire might be touching the trailer frame or other metal parts.
So frayed insulation, exposed wires, anything like that.
Yep. Any place where the electricity could be taking a detour.
What about those hard-to-reach spots? Any tips for making sure we don't miss anything?
Good flashlight is key. And sometimes you got to get creative. Maybe use a mirror or have a friend help you.
Okay, so let's say we've checked all the wires and everything looks good. What's next?
Time to test those trailer lights. We got to figure out if the problem is with a specific light or the wiring leading up to it.
Makes sense. How do we test them?
One by one, disconnect each light, replace the fuse, and see if it blows again. If it doesn't, you found your culprit. If it still blows, move on to the next light.
So it's like a process of elimination.
Exactly. And once you've found the problem light, you can take a closer look at its wiring and connections.
Gotcha. All right, what's next on our detective checklist?
Ground connections. Remember how important those are?
Yeah, grounding is like the safety net for the whole system, right?
Right. A bad ground connection can cause all sorts of weird issues, including those blown fuses. So we got to make sure those connections are clean, tight, and no rust.
The guide says to connect the ground wire to bare metal on the trailer frame. Why is that so important?
Because that bare metal provides the best path for the electricity to flow back to the source. Paint, rust, that stuff acts like a barrier.
It's like trying to drain a sink with a clogged pipe.
Perfect analogy. That blocked flow can cause all sorts of electrical problems, including blown fuses.
So we're not just looking for a connection, we're looking for a good, clean connection.
Exactly. And don't forget to check the ground connection on your vehicle's hitch, too.
Oh, good point. It's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to step 5. The trailer plug and connector. We already talked about protecting them from corrosion, but we got to make sure those connections are solid, too.
So check for bent pins, loose connections, any cracks or damage.
Yep. Anything that could be messing with the flow of electricity.
And if we see any damage, better to just replace the whole connector, right?
Definitely. Don't try to patch it up, just get a new one.
Okay, so far we've checked the wires, the lights, the ground connections, the plug and connector. We're like real detectives now. But what if we've done all that and we're still blowing fuses? What's the next step?
Well, then it might be time to consider upgrading your wiring.
What do you mean by upgrading?
Basically, replacing sections of the wiring harness with thicker gauge wire, especially if you've added more lights or other electrical stuff to your trailer.
So like if we're maxing out the capacity of the existing wiring, it's time for an upgrade.
Exactly. Like trying to fit too much stuff in a suitcase. Eventually, it's going to burst.
All right, I get it. But how do we know what gauge wire to use?
That's where that handy wire gauge chart comes in. It tells you what size wire you need based on how much power your trailer is using.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered troubleshooting. We know what to look for and how to fix it. But wouldn't it be great if we could prevent those blown fuses from happening in the first place?
Wouldn't it, though? And you know what? We can. That's what we'll talk about in the next part of our deep dive. Prevention is key.
I'm all ears. We'll be right back after a quick break to share the guide's top tips for keeping those fuses intact and those trailer lights shining bright. Okay, we're back and ready to talk prevention. Because who wants to waste time fixing stuff when you could be out there enjoying your trailer, right?
Right. A little bit of prevention can save a lot of trouble down the road.
Totally. So where do we start? What's the number one thing we can do to keep those fuses from blowing?
Well, we've talked about it a few times already, but it's worth repeating. Using the right wire gauge. Seriously, that's super important.
Yeah, using a wire that's too thin is just asking for problems.
Exactly. It's like trying to squeeze a whole river through a tiny little pipe. It's just not going to work.
And you could end up with blown fuses, damaged parts, or even a fire. Not good.
Not good at all.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure we're using the right gauge wire? Well, remember that chart we talked about earlier, the one in the guide?
Oh, yeah, the wire gauge chart. That's super helpful.
It is. It tells you exactly what size wire you need based on how much power your trailer uses.
Okay, so we've got the right wire gauge. What else can we do to be proactive?
Let's talk about those connectors again. Remember those little gremlins that can cause internal shorts?
Oh, yeah, those sneaky little guys.
Well, we talked about using dielectric grease, which is awesome for sealing out moisture and preventing corrosion.
Right, that's like their little raincoat.
Exactly. But there's another tool that can help, and it's called heat shrink tubing.
Heat shrink tubing. I've heard of it, but what does it actually do?
It's basically this cool plastic tube that shrinks when you heat it up. You slide it over the wire connection and then use a heat gun or even a hairdryer to shrink it down.
So it creates this tight seal around the connection?
Yep. Keeps moisture and dirt out and really helps prevent those internal shorts.
That's awesome. All right, so we've got the right wire gauge, dielectric grease, and heat shrink tubing. Any other preventive tips?
Don't forget about regular inspections. Just take a few minutes every now and then to look over your wiring and connectors, make sure everything looks good.
Yeah, especially for boat trailers, right?
Especially for boat trailers. Salt water is super corrosive. Check those connections at least once a month if you're using the trailer a lot.
And if you see anything that looks iffy, don't ignore it, right?
Right. Better to fix it early than wait until it becomes a big problem.
Totally. Now, the guide also mentions a pretty interesting solution for those who are really struggling with blown fuses, like it's happening all the time.
Oh yeah, you're talking about circuit breakers.
Circuit breakers, yeah. Can you explain what those are?
Sure, they're like resettable fuses. So instead of having to replace a blown fuse, you just flip a switch to reset the circuit breaker.
That sounds way more convenient than digging around for a new fuse, especially if it happens at night or something.
Totally. And if you have a circuit that's prone to blowing fuses, like maybe a set of lights that draws a lot of power, a circuit breaker could be a good option.
But aren't they more expensive than fuses?
They can be, but you have to think about the long run. If you're constantly replacing fuses, the cost can add up. Plus, it's just way more convenient.
Makes sense. Okay, circuit breakers, something to consider if you're having a lot of fuse problems. But, thinking about all these potential points of failure with traditional wiring, it makes me wonder, what about going wireless?
That's an interesting thought. Wireless technology is everywhere these days. Why not trailer wiring?
Right. Imagine no more tangled wires, no more corrosion problems with connectors, maybe even fewer things that can go wrong.
Sounds pretty great. But I'm sure there are challenges too.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what happens if the wireless signal drops out while you're driving? That wouldn't be good.
Definitely not. And there's the whole power issue. You'd need some way to keep those wireless components charged.
I guess it's kind of like with our phones and other wireless devices. Battery life, signal strength, it can be tricky.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see how wireless trailer technology develops in the future, whether it can overcome those challenges and become more common.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the why behind blown fuses, how to troubleshoot them, and how to prevent them. What's the big takeaway here?
I think the main thing is understanding that there are reasons those fuses blow.
Yeah.
It's not just bad luck, And by understanding those reasons, we can actually do something about it.
Totally. We don't have to just accept blown fuses as a part of life. We can be proactive, learn about our trailers, and keep things running smoothly.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Couldn't have it better myself. All right, folks, we hope this deep dive has been helpful. And remember, we're all in this together. If you have any questions or maybe some tips of your own, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, share your thoughts in the comments or connect with us on social media. Let's keep this conversation going.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about enjoying those trailer adventures without any unnecessary headaches.
Happy towing, everyone.
And may your fuses stay intact.
Need top-quality electrical wire? Baboom's got you covered. Get your 6-pack today. Each combo comes in 6 different colors and a total of 600 feet of wire. Perfect for any project, and you won't find a better price in the industry. Head over to baboom.com now to snag yours. That's baboom.com.